Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. I'm Brian Smith, and welcome to Grief to Growth, where we explore life's toughest challenges and life's biggest questions: who we are, why we're here, and where we go from here. And whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a longtime listener, I'm glad you're here today. Today's conversation is one I would believe will deeply resonate with anyone who has faced or who isn't facing the unimaginable, the loss of a spouse, especially the sudden loss of a spouse. My guest is Samina Bari. She's an inspiring leader, an author, and a podcast host who transformed profound personal grief into purposeful advocacy. After losing her husband in a tragic accident in 2023, Samina was struck by how uncomfortable and unprepared our culture is when it comes to grief, especially the grief of a surviving spouse. Samina is the host of the podcast Afterlife and the author of the best-selling book I Can, I Will, and I Did: Lessons on Life, Love, and Leadership. And her new book is called Don't Call Me Widow. It's a powerful practical guide for those wanting to support grieving spouses, not with abstract advice, but with insight grounded in raw, lived experience. In today's episode, Samina shares how grief brain affects decision-making and memory, the overlooked emotional and logistical weight of solo parenting after spousal loss, and why, despite what we might assume, the second year of grief can often be harder than the first. We'll also dive into the well-meaning but painful things that people often say and do instead of to truly support someone who's grieving. So whether you're grieving, supporting someone who is, or simply trying to understand grief better, this conversation, I believe, is going to be a must listen. It's about love, loss, and resilience, and how we can all show up better for each other when life gets hard. And don't forget, after the episode, head over to my Substack at grieftogrowth.substack.com, where I'll be posting an article about the conversation where you can join in the discussion, leave your thoughts, and connect with others walking the same path. And with that, I want to welcome to Grief to Growth, Samina Bari.
Thank you, Brian. So nice to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. We started talking before we started recording, and just the full disclosure for everybody, this is very timely for me. One of my best friends, Mike, passed away in April of this year. We're recording this beginning of December, and I'm navigating this thing with his wife, going through through his loss. So I want to thank you for being here today and sharing this really needed information.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's wonderful that you are helping to support her. And I know what she's going through, and I know how um, disruptive this type of a loss becomes to your sense of self. And to have people stand by you and support you with empathy and grace is one of the greatest gifts you're able to give her.
Yeah. Well, as we get started, I like to talk about your husband first. So tell me about your
Mm.
husband.
Oh, my husband, his name was Doug. He was amazing. I was madly in love with him. It was one of those love at first sight stories. And he was a Renaissance man. He was a wonderful professional. He had a million different hobbies. He was a magnificent chef. He was an unbelievably devoted father. And he made me laugh all the time. He just, quite simply brought joy into my life
Mhm.
as well as to the lives of so many countless others. He was kind of the son you would want to have, the parent you would want, the friend you would want, and of course the partner you would want in your life. He was really a remarkable person.
Yeah. I understand he passed in 2023, which is pretty recent. I know a lot of times people, when they haven't gone through something like this, they don't realize those first couple of years they seem to kind of go by really fast. So I understand it was a sudden passing. So without getting into, as much detail as you'd like to, tell me what happens.
Yeah, my girls, we had twin girls,
Mhm.
and they had just turned 7 years old. They were on spring break. We had just gone away, and life was good. We were all very happy and fortunate. And he and I had just been talking about, how that they were getting older. We could perhaps plan a trip, just the two of us.
Yeah.
Finally, after a long time, and by chance, our wedding anniversary was coming up in that May, and all was well. We were home for dinner. He went out for a little bit to see some friends, and he didn't make it home.
Mm.
And it just was such a jarring event. I remember being in shock. I remember shaking uncontrollably. I was in the hospital with him, so I was able to say goodbye.
Mm.
He wasn't conscious, and my children weren't. And I just remember it felt like I was outside of myself. I wasn't quite in my own body because it was sudden. It was an out of order death. He was
Yeah.
not ill. There was no time to grieve. There was no time to prepare. And really, the shock was what had taken over.
Hmm.
And I was diagnosed with traumatic, post-traumatic shock disorder, stress
Yeah.
disorder,
Yeah.
because it was something that had just my mind couldn't function. It wasn't able to reconcile what was going on. And that's actually why I talk about grief brain, grief
Hmm.
fog. That is real. That is the body's way of trying to protect us and trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. And in those moments, I can't tell you everything I did. I know I functioned somehow.
Hmm.
Friends told me I was able to have conversations. I can't recall a single conversation other than the conversation I had with my children,
Hmm.
when I told them eventually. And even then, it's a blur. That
Yeah.
first year is just, it's very difficult to fathom, to understand what's happening, because your reality is gone
Yeah. Yeah.
without warning. It's you've lost yourself, you've lost your person, you've lost your world. The earth kind of falls out, from under your feet.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit before we got started recording, and people want to compare grief, and every grief is unique, so I've lost a child, and people say I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. So but tell me what it's like to lose a spouse, to lose your a half of yourself, especially this out of order thing as you described it.
Yeah, I think, and I know I'm so sorry for your loss. And, yes, you should never compare losses because they are all different. But when you have your partner, this is the significant relationship that you have chosen in your life. It's
Right.
not bound by obligation, by blood. It is a choice. And when you find that right person, as I did with my husband, you're connected on almost a cellular level. I mean, you think we were together for 21 years, all of my adult life. So as we grow as people, we become the people who we're going to be, but we do that because we have someone in our lives. So, for example, we compromise on some things, we ease up on others, we take on more of a role here or there. We can finish each other's thoughts. We can, kind of finish each other's sentences, and we build our life and our dreams together.
Hmm.
And in that instant, it's all gone. And a part of you dies with that loss because who are we now?
Right.
Who we were part of a relationship. We were a couple. We were a unit. We were a team. We were partners, confidants. We kept each other's secrets. We knew each other's vulnerabilities. We comforted each other, and we created dreams and visions for our future. And then
Hmm.
in an instant, it's gone. And what I was talking about with an out of order death is so many people in an attempt to empathize with me said, "Oh, I know how you're feeling. My mother just passed. She was my best friend. She was 96."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sorry for that loss, but in life, you are so privileged to have been able to see your mother live the entire continuum of her lifespan.
Hmm. Hmm.
She was, humans don't live longer than that. She raised a good adult. She perhaps saw children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She's lived a life. And so that's to be expected. But to compare it to my loss, where I had a husband in the prime of his life, raising twin young girls,
Yeah.
where we had another 30 years ahead of us.
Right.
That's an out of order death. It's an out of order death. It's as traumatic when you don't have that chance to say goodbye. There was no warning.
Yeah.
And not that I wish illness on anyone, but when someone is ill, there's a part of you that grieves that person while they're still breathing, while they're still there, and you have the chance to say all of the things in your heart, and you know that you're able to send them off with dignity and with the love that you intended.
Hmm.
And when it happens suddenly and tragically, you don't have that. You don't, your mind is not functioning. You don't have those moments. Um, my children never got to say goodbye, and they still cry about that. They
Right.
still lament about that, and they will carry that for the rest of their lives. And
Mm.
all I could do in that moment of sheer and utter confusion and shock and panic and despair was all I could think of was I played a video of my children's voices and held it up to my husband's ear
Yeah.
so he could hear their voices.
Yeah.
Whether or not he did, I don't know. I like to think that he could. I like to think that he could hear me,
Hmm.
and had some sort of presence. Um, that's the only comfort I could give myself.
Yeah. And with your girls, I mean, so you had to tell them they weren't there. What was that like for you? And what was it like for you to have to carry that message to them?
Oh, it's something you never ever want to ever experience. My
Yeah.
children, my husband, on top of being so amazing, had also decided that he loved being a dad so much after a decade of infertility that we had that he chose to stay home with the girls.
Oh,
And
wow.
so he was the full-time parent. And so their bond with him was far more close than it was with me because I worked. He allowed me to soar professionally and he held down the fort.
Mm.
So that was their primary parent. And all I could think of was they had been away the day that he had passed away. And that was
Mm.
pre-planned because he and I were having a lovely, adult weekend to
Yeah.
ourselves. We'd
Okay.
planned he had planned a babysitter, believe it or not. He had planned that for me. And the babysitter had them, and I said, hold them for one more day. So they have one more day of happiness.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's how I look at it because it's everything is before and after,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Everything is a before and after. And, there was a part of them that knew right away because when they walked into my house, they saw all of their aunties from all over the country and all different parts of their lives. Everyone had gathered at my house to support me and the girls. And so when they walked in and they saw, especially my dearest friend from New York had flown over right away, they knew something was wrong. And
Yeah.
so when I sat them in their rooms and I told them that something terrible had happened, they knew.
Yeah.
They knew. And it broke my heart. One went into, oh my God, he was my everything. Daddy was my everything. How that can't be true. And the other one, even though they're twins, went into a little bit of denial and problem solving mode, just in order to, kind of figure out how to cope.
Hmm.
And because he was a magnificent chef, she said, "Mommy, you don't cook. We're going to starve." And it
Yeah.
was seemingly like a lighthearted, silly thing to say, but with that comment, she recognized the gravity of the hole in our lives,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we can't function without him.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing this because I really want to help people understand, from the outside what the gravity, as you said, of this thing because it changes literally everything in your life from the big practical things down to the little things like who's going to cook and who's going to take care of us. And help people understand because I've learned this as I mentioned I'm going through this with my friend right now, like some of the practical things that we don't think about after someone passes because you do assume certain things like financial things or bank accounts or houses and stuff like that. Did you have any difficulty with things like that?
Oh, tremendous amount. Oh my gosh, that's probably one of the biggest things. Because again, you're, here's the thing, we plan for death, right? We do the
Hmm.
right things. We
Yeah,
create a
right.
will, we create a trust, we have it all done. But when that moment happens, there's nothing rational to execute on. You're driven purely by emotions. And in my case, it was, lack of emotion. It was shock. It was confusion. It was all these other things.
Hmm.
And, that's just the half of it. I think, really thinking through the fact that there is this void, it's not just in the practical rational things, but it's also in the, what else did the partner do to
Hmm.
provide
Yeah,
balance in that household?
right.
So, I was supported by an amazing community, and I call them my chosen family, and I'm so proud of the people who are in my life. They showed up and they picked me up off the floor and they just handled everything without making anything uncomfortable for anyone.
Hmm.
They let me talk, they let me sleep. They, gently told me, like, brought me a cup of tea and asked me to take a sip. They didn't force anything on me. They
Hmm.
took over figuring out who would pick up the children and how to care for the children. Everybody took on a role. And I think that was, one of the biggest learnings for me. We all react differently, and everyone was in shock upon his passing because he was with a lot of my friends the night he died.
Hmm.
So they too were reeling from the disbelief.
Hmm.
But they leaned into what they were most comfortable with, and they came together and just partnered. So I had people from different parts of my life who had never met before, but who had heard of one another,
Hmm.
and they formed their own text chains. One who was, superb at communications took on the task of writing an obituary, a draft for me to look at. All of the things that I would have to do,
Hmm.
they took on. Another one took on all of the logistics of the memorial. Another one took on, making my Social Security appointment, figuring out what we wanted inscribed on the urn. They all played a role, and others took on the child, my children's support roles, and
Hmm.
they made sure the children were being attended to and talked to and comforted and fed and snuggled with, and they had safe people they could cry with,
Hmm.
and that they knew that it wasn't just all about mommy, but they were also there for them too. And that's a really important thing for anyone who's going through it with children. And it doesn't matter if your children are teens, don't ignore the children. I've heard that too often because there is
Yeah.
this terrible myth, it's a dangerous myth, that children are resilient. And that is only stated by people who don't have a child or have never experienced a child in the midst of trauma and grief.
Hmm.
Children who experience the loss of a parent at a young age are far more susceptible to anxiety, mental health issues, depression, suicidal ideations, if left untreated. And so, that was one of the biggest things that weighed on me was
Yeah.
not just me, but all my poor babies. My poor babies. How are they going to do this? How are they going to be? So, it's just really kind of thinking through, what would you want? Like, I think that with this type of a loss, it becomes so uncomfortable for people because they don't want to see it in themselves. Because, even though we say, God forbid I die, right? I mean, it is not God forbid. It will happen,
Right.
but you're confronted with the reality of it, and it's so shocking that I think you freeze up or you don't know what to do or say. Just do something. Do it with
Hmm.
intention. Do it with kindness. Don't try to explain it away. Don't try to bring religion into it when it's not welcomed. Don't use platitudes.
Hmm.
Just be there, sit with us in the sadness and the silence. Don't expect a conversation. Simple, simple gestures are the most powerful ones because it makes us feel like we're not completely alone, even though we feel very isolated in our loss.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the practical things, and you mentioned some of them that people can do because when someone goes through something like this, we always say, "Well, call me if you need anything, or let me know what I can do for you."
Yeah.
And so I'm sure people said that to you. So what would you like as a grieving person? What's helpful?
Yeah. Those two phrases were said to me, and those are infuriating phrases. And I know we're all used to it because in that moment, you have just burdened us with having to think about stuff to do, to tell you, right? So again, because it's so unfathomable, because you really can't imagine what that's like. Because in a rational state, of course. But remember, as a society, we're not used to asking for help,
Yeah.
and now we've got a grief-addled brain, and we can't think straight. We don't know if we've showered or eaten or slept. We don't know any of this.
Hmm.
Please don't ask that question, but just do something.
Hmm.
So, a couple of things that I mentioned, someone, if there people are great with the food chains, right? And they sign up and then done, it's my obligation is done. Well, how about portioning it all out when it's done, cleaning up the dishes, freezing some, labeling some, doing that work,
Hmm.
thinking about the week, getting the mail, taking the bills and figuring those things out. Freeze your loved one's credit is the first thing I always say too, because if you make an announcement, there are so many scammers now. I mean, this whole world is, full of
Yeah.
nefarious, wrongdoers. Do those types of practical things. Drive the children to school, take the children to the park, give them a little bit of normalcy,
Mm.
because the act of taking a child and giving the adult room to grieve and breathe without the thought of their child is a gift to us, because we don't have that, because in our minds we are carrying a crushing mental burden of
Hmm.
not just our grief and what are we going to do, but how are my children? Where Because you're reflecting and absorbing their grief as well as your own. So it's very, very heavy.
Yeah. And when we talked before we got started, you talked about the loss of past, kind of present, and future. Can you frame that for people that are listening now?
Yeah, um, it depends on, I guess, how long you've been with someone, or, the closeness of your relationship. But,
Hmm.
as I mentioned, I was with my husband for over 20 years, 21 years.
Hmm.
So that's my formative my adult life.
Right.
So at this point, I have my memories before him, like teenage memories. You kind of pick and choose your memories the older you get. And so much of my past involved him. And whether he was directly involved or he facilitated something, but he was always in my past.
Hmm.
He was part of my future. And we had dreams of what we would, where our children would go to school or what we would do in retirement. And all of a sudden, that's gone,
Yeah.
because you've got no one to share that memory with anymore. You've got no one to correct that memory. Did that really happen? Because time, your mind plays tricks with you, and time does, your memories do fade a little bit. But
Yes.
now you've got no one to check them with. You've
Hmm.
got no one to validate that you had that past. And your present, every day is just surviving. And future, I mean, I'm 2.5 years out, but I can't picture my future still. There's no future for me. I can get to what my children will look like, I think. I can think about the grades in school, but I have no future. I have no vision for myself
Yeah.
because it took my dreams away.
Yeah. And help people, understand that, that idea, because you're right. You've got this idea, and we never know what's going to happen in the future. But we
Of
think we
course.
do. We have a vision for it. What's it like when that vision is just like gone? Like you can't see it.
Yeah, it's I can't say it's scary, because for me it's a new normal. I mean,
Mm.
I assume I'll be somewhere. I don't, but I can't like physically see myself. You can
Right.
kind of see yourself with gray hair or children, grandchildren. You kind of have those nice vision dreams. I
Right.
don't have those anymore. So what I do is I simply don't plan for anything that long anymore.
Mm.
I can get out to a year, and I mark it by holidays. And I mark it by holidays because those are the chunks of time that I have to travel with my kids.
Mm.
And I am now marking time with travel. And
No.
I'm doing it as a building block. And this is just me personally. I'm doing it as a
Hmm.
building block so I can create new memories for my children and
Hmm.
experiences for my children, so that they and I can enjoy the time we have in a different way.
Yeah.
Because, we're not a family of four anymore. We're not, a happy, shiny nuclear family. We are something else. We're still a family, but we're a different kind of family now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate that a little bit because after my daughter passed, people would talk to me about the future, and I'm like, I didn't want to think about it. So as it slowly started to come back over time, it was like, okay, now I can maybe imagine a week out or a month out or a couple of months, but it would make me angry when people would talk about, too far out. So
Absolutely.
people
Me
need,
too.
yeah, people need to understand. It's like everything just draws in. It becomes like I can only deal with right now. I can't deal with that.
Right. And I think, and I don't think that's ill-intentioned. I think, people did that with me too. They feel that if they can bring some happiness and joy and
Yeah,
positivity, that you'll somehow magically feel better because that's what they want. They want to fix it, but they
right.
can't fix us.
Yeah.
Grief is not something to be fixed, and certainly not by an outside source. And that's again their discomfort because, you know, what are they supposed to say? Right.
Right.
So they resort to platitudes, or they resort to, oh, you'll be thriving. Do when you're over this, things like that, again,
Yeah.
that are kind of a cognitive disconnect.
Hmm.
But that's really why I wrote my book, Don't Call Me Widow, because really what I really wanted to do is draw back the curtain on what it is we are actually feeling and going through
Yeah.
when the big you says or does things to us in your attempt to comfort us,
Yeah.
which fails
Yeah.
miserably. And you don't realize it's failing because you can't imagine what we're feeling. And I think that's really why I created it, because I feel, I just felt like this is a loss like no other.
Hmm.
And it's unimaginable. Um, because you've lost yourself in this loss. You've
Yeah.
lost your future. You've lost yourself. You've lost, every bit of certainty you thought you had in this world. And you have to somehow rebuild.
Yeah. By the way, I love the title of your book. And it was after my friend Mike passed, and it was a couple days later, I was thinking about Lisa, his wife, and I thought of the word widow, and I'm just like, oh, it just sounds so ugly.
Doesn't it? I know. I've
It
always had such a visceral reaction to it. And I looked it up, and I put it in my book. It's actually it was created early centuries as Sanskrit and Old English, but essentially it means to be destitute and to
mm,
be basically of no worth to society.
mm,
And yet this is a term we carry forward, and that doesn't define me. So I
yeah.
can't stand that word. And now I know why, because I actually took the time to look it up.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I guess when we think of it, we think about women who've lost their husbands when they're 70s or 80s or 90. That's, as you said,
yeah,
kind of toward the end of that natural
right.
thing. But when it's a person who's in the prime of their life and raising their children and thinking they have 30 or 40 more years to go, and then suddenly it's like you're kind of almost feels like you're getting pushed aside, I would imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why I've never used the word, and I ask people not to call me that. And I say that I'm married, my husband died. I just say it that way.
Yeah.
I don't put that title on me because it's such an ugly, archaic title that it doesn't do women any good. And it does kind of perpetuate that fear and that, oh, poor so and so.
Hmm.
No, we're going to still be here. And when we look at our society, demographically, women tend to outlive men,
Oh
by
yeah.
5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
And we are going to have a lot of women who are, who have lost their partners.
Hmm.
And, that really coincides with this great wealth transfer that we keep on hearing about, that women in the United States will be in charge of two-thirds of all of the private wealth in the United States,
Hmm.
um, due to, in large part, inheritances.
Oh wow.
So it's a fearsome number
Hmm.
and a group of women. And, the use of widow, I feel, is such a misnomer and really doesn't do any society or women any good, because
Yeah.
we will rebuild, we will make impacts, we will do things after this, we will somehow figure out a way, to overcome this. But, we'll do more. And so I feel like how society has always framed this particular loss has been, not as an important loss yet, while it is.
Yeah.
And it's diminished women and kind of put them aside. So, what I hear from so many women who've lost their husband is their community, the couples they socialize with regularly, that they don't invite them out anymore.
Yeah.
They don't invite them out as a single woman. And, sometimes I hear it's because they're awkward. Other times I hear it's because the women are afraid that the woman will go after their husbands. Such nonsense. I think it's
Hmm.
outdated thinking. Um, and that's why, to me, setting the record straight was really important because there
Yeah.
is a divide between these worlds and somehow they don't meet and no one
Yeah.
talks to the two of them. The widow groups talk to one another and lament and complain, and then everyone continues to remain on the outside. So I really wanted to bring them together to
Yeah.
create a broader appreciation because one day it will happen to everyone.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of those transitions that like the idea of like, okay, so you're a couple,
Mhm,
you're Doug and Samina, and
mhm.
now you're Samina. And so what was it like for you with your friends in terms of what some of the things they may have done well and some of the things you might have wished they'd done differently in terms of including you? Because it's awkward when we've known someone our lives as this and now you're single.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do remember in my early, who am I? I remember saying like, who am I? Who am I?
Right.
Again, it was a shock. It was shock and disbelief because I lost him and I lost me. And my friends, I have to say again, they are remarkable. I have been
Mhm.
included in everything.
Mm.
I am frequently when the two couples go out, we used to be three couples, it's a party of five or it's a party of seven, it's
Hmm.
whatever it is. I am always included. And of course, there are some things that they go to that, they would do anyway. But
Hmm.
by and large, my friend groups, even with husbands,
Hmm.
has remained intact.
Mm.
And I think that's the important thing. And there's no awkwardness. And I think when my friends actually said part of the reason for it is because very early on, I told everyone, you say his name.
Mm.
Do
Yeah.
not forget
Yeah.
him. Do not erase him. Do not think it's going to make me sad. Because the more you say his name, the more I know he mattered to everyone.
Yeah.
And so he is regular, like Doug's name is everywhere. It's invoked regularly, weekly, now with a sense of it like he's here with us in spirit.
Okay.
Doug would love this, and oh, he'd be such a great thing for this. Oh, people take pictures of things like I'm taking it because I think Doug would like it. It somehow doesn't make sense, but I think making it okay.
Hmm.
I think that's a big part of it. So there's no discomfort on their part. I don't talk about it all the time. It's not, a pity party where we're talking about it all the time, but
Right.
it's just fine. It's easy.
Yeah.
It's no one shuts anyone down and it's all done with love and, truly missing someone. And
Yeah.
so that bonds us. It doesn't separate us.
And how's that been? You said your friends were comfortable inviting you. How's it been for you going and being there without Doug? Is it how was that uh experienced by you?
Well, I would be lying if I said it doesn't do anything. I mean, of course, I wish he were there, and
Yeah.
it was hard the very first few times. It made me very, very sad. It made me more sad for my children, really,
Hmm.
because it's my need for children to see intact families. Children with their fathers.
Yeah.
I knew was a heavy burden for them,
Yeah.
and so my heart really breaks for them, always when they go through this.
Right.
For me, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't awkward because again, he was so very well known in our community that I've felt nothing but love and inclusion and the husbands and the wives have all stepped in to play different roles.
Yeah.
Some of the husbands come in and do, help me with errands and things like that. One is helping me buy a car. Um, they check in on me. And it's all done with just a sense of love and community.
Yeah.
So I have not felt that. I do miss him though.
Yeah, of
I
course.
of
Yeah.
course, like I miss him and I talk to him regularly and I encourage my kids to do that. And now my kids have started. My kids have started saying, "Oh, Daddy did this," or, "I wish Daddy were here." And I encourage that because no good comes of, repressing such big, big emotions, and especially
Yeah.
in children who
Yeah.
don't have coping mechanisms.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked, of course, you miss him. Because sometimes people will, I don't know if it's an excuse that we'll use, but we'll say, well, I don't know if we should include her because she might feel awkward. And I remember when my friend Mike passed away, it was April 7th, and we have a derby party every year. My wife's from Kentucky, so we have a Kentucky Derby party every year, first weekend in May. And Lisa was over, and we were there with our friends, and actually I think we'd even called her over because she was thinking, well, should I come to the party or not? Because it's so soon, and what are people going to think? And we have a. It sounds like you're very fortunate to have a group like we are fortunate to have. And we're like, yes, we want you to come. We want you to be there. Because you and Mike would be there, and you're still part of. We call ourselves a tribe. You're still part of the
Mhm.
tribe. And then when the party came, we're like, we want to say some words about Mike, and so we asked Lisa, can we do that? And she's like, well, it's going to bring the party down, and we're like, that's okay. We'll just bring it back up. So I want people to understand it's okay to include the person and to speak the person's name who's no longer physically with us and include them as part of the group.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you did that. And I don't know if I told you this, but my husband died on April 7th also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't think you should project, will that be awkward for, I think you just keep on inviting her and
Right.
she will come when she can. She will, she will say when she's not up to it, and you have to give
Mm-hmm.
her that, give her that agency to sometimes just not be in the mood.
Mm-hmm.
But always make the offer. Make it gently, make it, sincere. And I think including him, Mike is great. We belong to a country club community, and I had not been to the club since they held his memorial service.
Mm.
And that was on May 5th. So we did the memorial service on our wedding anniversary because he died so close to our wedding
Oh, wow.
anniversary. Well, I thought I could either be miserable by myself or I could have everyone come be sad together
Yeah.
on a day that, was meant to be joyful, but we're still remembering him.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been to the clubhouse since May, and then I wanted to try to go be out in public by myself
Mm-hmm.
for his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the club and I said, I'm going to plan just, a quiet dinner with the girls and in honor of his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And, a few friends said, oh, we want to come, support you. And before you know it, I had like 25 people
Mm.
join us for dinner because they all wanted to be there. And they put us in a different room, and everyone toasted him, and it became joyful. It
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
joyful, and yes, tinged with sadness, but tinged with friendship and love and camaraderie. So I think, yes, keep asking. Don't
Yeah.
ever not ask because we already feel unsure and unsteady and isolated because of
Mm-hmm.
our loss. But if you've got friends who are able to lift you out of that and act gently and continue to think about you, that's just gift.
Yeah, and the reason why I smiled when you said you could be miserable by yourself, that's exactly what I said to Lisa about the party. I said you can either be miserable by yourself, or you can come here and be miserable with the rest of us, because you're going to be miserable either way, so you might as well be with us.
Right, right. I mean, I think you have to have those friends. Sounds like you have that kind of, friendship group as well,
Yeah.
where, everyone wanted to be a part of it. People, I want to be part of this dinner. And I had thought, oh, I'm going to muster up all my courage and I'm going to try not to cry and I'm going to have dinner on his birthday. And it became joyful
Hmm.
because everyone wanted to celebrate him.
Yeah.
And, that made me feel better. And I
Yeah.
think but the community has been so important, part of my healing, and part of me getting through some stuff, because I felt supported
Hmm.
and considered and included the whole time.
I think that's fantastic, and I'm very grateful for you to have that because I think it's actually pretty rare. I think a lot of times people do tend to run away, and we don't have and it's never out of a sense of ill intention. People just they're awkward, they're awkward around people that are in grief, and we're not taught how to deal with it. And as
Right.
you said, they're trying to fix you, and people need to understand this is a process. It's not something that's going to just like go away because you said some platitudes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's kind of my key takeaway in my book is that our grief is not about your discomfort, and
Yeah.
you behave the way you do because you're uncomfortable. So if you could
Yes.
push that aside and be more compassionate and intentional and understand how we are taking it, hearing it, what we're experiencing,
Hmm.
perhaps this gives you a little look into how you can show up for others because one day you'll want that support too.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that's kind of the aha, it may be uncomfortable now, but everyone will need it. And wouldn't you want your husband or your wife or, your loved one to have that same compassionate support in their darkest moments?
Yeah. Now, Samina, you said you're about 2.5 years into your grief journey now. Describe for people how your grief has changed over time. I know you mentioned something. I think about the second year can actually be a little bit more difficult than the first. What's your journey been like? With the caveat for everybody that everybody's grief
Is
journey is
different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd say I spent the first year really in a state of utter shock, panic, anxiety. I was on lots of medications. I wasn't able to drive. I physically could not figure out how to drive. I have
Mm.
no recollection. So I had to have a lot of people help me throughout my period of time. And I
Hmm.
spent a lot of time in bed. I mean, it hit me like it really just knocks you off of your feet. And as strong as you are through anything else, this is something that is, just unimaginable. It's not like anything else you'll ever experience.
Hmm.
So I really wasn't functioning. So grief to me was, losing a lot of weight, not being able to eat, not having, not remembering to shower.
Hmm.
I had a lot of people helping to take care of my children. My children would say, Mommy, why are you always in bed? And, I couldn't, I didn't even have the energy to muster up false happiness or just,
Hmm.
so I hired some people. I called on friends and family to help.
Hmm.
And year two, getting past that 1 year anniversary, everybody knew the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah.
And, what should we do? How should we, what should we do? So I just did a dinner. I just did a dinner so we could all be together. I didn't want to do anything huge
Hmm.
because I just couldn't. And I also realized after it was done that, oh my God, this is forever. Like I
Yeah.
just spent this 1 year trying to survive. And I did everything. I went through all these motions. I did all of the paperwork. I did all of the things you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
But now it's a year. Now, what do I do? I don't have all of those things to distract me. The paperwork, which is endless and takes a really, really long time,
Yeah.
or the plans for his birthday, or the plan for Christmas, or I was trying to keep myself so busy
Right.
within my grief, doing the things you're supposed to do when it's fresh and when it
Hmm.
happens. But when that 1 year anniversary happens, the just permanence of it really hits hard. And society expects you to move on,
Yeah.
but you don't. And as you said, it's a journey, and it doesn't mean the journey ever ends. Grief, it's messy, it's chaotic, it's unpredictable. Triggers are everywhere.
Hmm.
Just anything can trigger it. But it just became much more, I don't know, I guess mentally challenging after year two because you're really thinking, okay, now I've got to do something else.
Yeah.
Now I've spent that first year doing everything associated with it, and now what? And that's when it becomes harder because people also disappear after that first year because people
Yeah.
say, okay, 1 year, great, back to our lives.
Hmm.
And you're just reeling because you don't know what that means anymore. You're still picking up pieces, and now you're trying to put together a path forward. And it's also lonely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for explaining that because I think it surprised me, and I think it surprises a lot of people. As you said, that first year you're getting through it, you've got all these things, and you kind of like hit these milestones. It's like, well, this is the first birthday, this is the first Christmas, this is the first Thanksgiving, this,
Right.
and then you realize, oh wait, they're going to be there going to be a lot more of these. It's not just getting through that time. So that I think that's why it hits harder for some people that second year. I was hesitate. I was just talking to someone earlier today in a group that I help with, and I said I always hesitate to tell someone the first year. It can get harder the second year, because it's not like it gets harder like the grief gets deeper or anything like that. It actually, I don't think that's true. It's more, it's just the permanence is I think what really
Yes.
sinks in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, that's when it hits you. This is forever.
Yeah,
This, okay, I survived somehow. And it was long and it was painful. And in some ways it seems fast. But now
yeah.
what? I'm going to I'm going to celebrate every one of my birthdays alone. He'll never celebrate another birthday. Every new year that starts will be another year without him.
Hmm.
Then you really start to almost like catastrophize the future because
Right,
it's
right,
magnified.
right.
And that's hard and that's daunting. And, that's why, when I said to you earlier, like, I can't really envision myself as older than I am now. To
Hmm.
me, I'm frozen in time,
Hmm.
um, because my mind won't let me do it. Again,
Yeah,
I think it's that protective mechanism in your mind. It's protecting you from trauma and grief, and that's why you really lose those functions when you're
yeah.
deeply into it, because it changes your brain chemistry.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. I learned this was back when I was, my early grief, that there are people when we are that close with someone, we're chemically attached to them. It's not just, emotionally. It's
Correct.
like
It's cellular. Yes,
it's
yeah.
cellular, and it's like drug withdrawal. So that explains the grief fog, which, as you said, is very real. People think they're losing their minds. They think they're going through early dementia. They're like, I walked into the room. I don't know what I came here for. So I tell people all those types of things are normal, and they will come back. It's just your brain is just overwhelmed with
Hmm.
this reality that doesn't seem real. And so I would, those first weeks, months, I guess, waking up and reliving it over again. Did you go through that experience where it's like this really happened?
Yes, for me it did because again mine was traumatic.
Right.
And so um I just couldn't get the image out of him, out of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course I was panicking. Did I tell him I loved him enough? Did I, like
Yeah.
I just kept on playing it like, could he hear me? Should I have done this? Should I, he was hooked up to, and I like laid on him a little bit. I'm like, oh, I hope he I didn't hurt him. Like you just do play that over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's, there's a really strange feeling of guilt, that I at least experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that I had somehow brought this on. I thought that we had just been enjoying ourselves. We had just been commenting on how wonderful life was. I was the happiest I'd ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids were healthy. He was healthy. I was healthy. We had the world ahead of us and our lives ahead of us. And somehow I felt like I had brought that on, by thinking it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had taken my life for granted. I had thought it was perfect. I thought it was too good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I grappled with that for months.
Yeah.
That somehow this was my fault. Somehow I willed this. And I know it's not rational. But again, you're not rational in those early months because, you just don't have that capacity. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying that. And it's so important to people understand that because I don't think I've talked to a single parent that didn't feel some sort of guilt or responsibility when they lost a child. And it's also the same with spouses. Maybe not to as great an extent, but I've worked with more parents and spouses.
Mhm.
But our brains start to come this crazy things as somehow my fault because of something I said or something I didn't say, or as you said, did I tell him I love him enough? Did he hear me? Did he feel alone? Did he feel scared? All those kind of crazy thoughts go through our minds, and I'm glad you said that because I want to normalize that for people so they don't feel like it's just me. There's something wrong with me. I think it's a normal human response.
I think it is, because it is that trauma. And something we talked about grief, a grief brain. you lose all of those senses. But I will tell you, I am changed since that happened. So, you had
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, like, you lose some of it and then it comes back. It doesn't always come back. It does, sometimes it does have permanent change. So, for
Hmm.
example, I used to be tough as nails. And now if someone looks at me wrong, I'm like, I devolve into a puddle of tears. Like I
Hmm.
just lost that part of me.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think it's made me much more empathetic to
Hmm.
others.
Hmm.
And, shame on me. I wasn't before, right? Because I thought, I was just living my life and doing my thing. And, I had always told my husband he was a nicer person than me because he was really an empath. He was very, very compassionate. And
Hmm.
I was just always busy, kind of just not thinking about things.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it has changed me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways well, in many ways, I'm a better parent. He was the primary parent, but I've adopted more of his style and technique
Hmm.
to parenting.
Hmm.
But yeah, there is a part of me, I know my stamina is not the same. My level of motivation, drive has shifted.
Hmm.
So I'm not the same person I was. So those things
Oh,
didn't come back.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I've fundamentally changed. So the big who am I now is still a big question mark.
Yeah, excellent point. There are permanent changes, and people will ask me, will I ever be the same person I was before? And my answer is probably not, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because I'm like, why would you want to waste all this pain that you're going through? You can use it to to become more empathetic, to become more patient, maybe to become a better parent, etc. The other thing I want to say, not to discount what you said about like some of these changes are permanent, but it sometimes takes longer for things to come back than we expect. A lot of times when I'm counseling people, they're like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. And I'll ask them, well, how long has it been? And they'll say it's been a year or it's been 2 years. As someone, for me, it's been 10 years since my daughter passed. I still consider 2 years to be early grief.
Yeah, that's fair.
There is no end, but I think about where I was at 2 years versus where I was at 5 years versus where I was at 7 years. At 2 years, I thought I was, done with these, coming back from certain things, but I wasn't yet. It's such a deep wound. I mean, you think the deeper the wound, the longer it takes to come back. So
No, you're absolutely right.
some of those
Yeah.
things, I think may come back, but you're still going through even at 2.5 years, it's still early.
No, absolutely. You're right. Yeah, yeah, saying for you it was 10 years. I have a friend who lost her daughter and her mother within a very short period of time, and she said
Mm-hmm.
it took her 7 years
Mm-hmm.
to really feel like she was herself again.
Yeah.
So yes, I recognize it's still early, and
I well,
again,
I've talked to a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, and it was interesting. I talked to a woman. It was an ST, spiritual transform. It wasn't technically a near-death experience, and she went through all these changes, and it was 7 years. So 7 years. I'm not, again, we have to be very careful because everybody's
right, it's
different.
different, right?
But I'd say 7 years is probably not unrealistic to expect to really integrate. Because the thing about grief is we've talked about over and over again, you don't get over it, but you integrate the experience and you kind of bring it together. So some of those changes that are good changes, you'll decide I'm going to keep these. But some of the other things like your stamina, maybe patience and stuff like that might start coming back, but it might take a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is early days, and here it is. I'm putting my own expectations, my old expectations on myself. Like this is,
Yeah,
and that's again for me trying to take back some semblance of control,
yeah,
right?
yeah, of
Because I didn't
course,
have
yeah,
any, right? And so,
of course.
but no,
It's
I recognize I have to give myself more time.
Yeah, and I really, I really, like I said, I hesitate to say that to people. It's like, 7 years because it seems like so long, and we want to be like back to where we want to bounce back. And I always use analogies in my business. It's a tree. I tell people when you plant a seed to grow a tree, you don't look at the tree and expect it to be there the next day or the next week or the next month or even the next year. It takes a while to grow a tree, and that's kind of what we're going through when we go through these really, really life. I don't even know how to put it. Like you said, it's
Life
before and
altering.
after.
It's
Yeah,
it's it's life altering. It really
yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's like a different life. There,
Right.
as you said, there's before and there's after. There's who you were before and there's who you are becoming now.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there is so, it is one of those things that no one really thinks about, especially as we all get older, we're
Hmm.
still not thinking about it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but it is going to happen. And, I've even noticed just my professional circles. There's so many people, colleagues, former colleagues who are posting announcements of other colleagues who've passed away. And I thought, oh my God, we really have to get better at this as a society,
Mm-hmm.
of recognizing what it is that, life is not, we're not, no one's, we're not all living till 100, that life is full of challenges, that grief is a part of life,
Mm-hmm.
and that it deserves the kind of attention and respect that it should get
Yeah.
because it touches us all. It touches us all, and we just have to get a little bit more real with it.
Yeah. You said something that I want to touch on. You talked about solo parenting as opposed to single parenting. And explain to people what that means to you.
Oh, yes. So, single parenting is a very well-established term. It's usually a parent has chosen to raise a child by themselves or
Hmm.
through circumstance, divorce. There was a choice that was
Hmm.
made by one or two adults to raise a child or children as a single person.
Right.
Solo means completely alone.
Yeah.
And solo parenting is what we who have lost our partner are doing with our children.
Hmm.
And why I put that out there was because there was something there's so much on social media about men taking credit for having their children for the day. I mean, they're happily married. They should be an equal parent anyway, but
Right.
somehow they want a pat on the back for being a solo parent. And it came up in my grief group. And so much of what's in my book comes from the discussions in my grief group.
Hmm.
And it's kind of all of the things that just really piss us off because we are solo. We have no one to share the mental load of making important decisions for our children with.
Hmm.
We have to do all of, not just forget about coordinating and taking them to doctor's appointments, but the school, how are they doing in school? Should we look at another school? How should we make this decision for our child? How do we guide them towards colleges? Do they need therapy? We bear 110% of that
Hmm.
by ourselves. There is no one to have the conversation with who would love your child the way a parent would love your child. You can, yes, of course, you can bat it through, with friends or family just for opinions, but
Hmm.
it's not the same. It's not that same like, you know, partnered decision making,
Right.
partnered thinking, partnered planning. We don't have that.
Yeah.
So, when I say that, my friend groups, they go out, sometimes without me, most of the time it's because I don't have anyone to watch my children,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I have to rely on nannies and babysitters or this person or that person. The
Hmm.
mental load is very, very big. I can no longer go on a business trip or do a quick overnight, or I can't do anything spontaneously.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, I've lost that. And there's no one to call for that immediate backup. It's all got to be carefully orchestrated and thought through and planned with backups and this and that. And so that is solo parenting. That is,
Yeah.
you are on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for explaining that. So, Samina, I know you also have a podcast. Talk about your podcast. What did you cover and who's it for?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Afterlife, and
Hmm.
it really is a companion to my book. So the book is really meant to be a practical guide to help
Hmm.
shepherd someone through supporting someone they love who's lost a spouse. The podcast really digs deep into several topics of some people who supported me as well as someone who runs a grief group for children. And what it does is it brings to life what I am talking about in the book. And so when I talk about how does a friend show up for someone, I have two of my friends. How did they push aside their discomfort?
Hmm.
How did they know what to do? How did they not let grief kind of crumble them. How were they able to be such good support people? And in those episodes, there are really so many wonderful tidbits about making people more comfortable with themselves and really letting themselves be present for the ones they love. In one of my episodes, I spoke with my financial advisor who really helped me through a lot of the paperwork because when you are grieving the loss of your spouse, there's a ton of paperwork to do. And
Yeah.
again, it's overwhelming, even in the best of circumstances. But now compound that with grief and inability to focus on it. And it's really daunting, but it's all crucially important to
Hmm.
ensure you're sustainable and you're able to survive.
Yeah.
And so he and I spoke about that. He literally came to my house with forms filled out for me to just sign. He bought me Danishes. He sat with me for coffee. He went that extra mile, but we talked about all of the important things that people need to know so that when you step in for someone you love and you need to help them organize their affairs, you'll
Hmm.
know what to do. And, I also spoke with the woman, Cara Belvin, who runs a very important and powerful group for children who are experiencing the loss of their parent. She's on the East Coast, and she lost her mother when she was a child, and it profoundly transformed her life.
Hmm.
And she, like me, recognizes the importance of supporting children through their grief and not sweeping it under the rug and saying children are so resilient because
Yeah.
they need extra care and extra attention so that they can grow up to be successful in adulthood because this loss shapes them in so very many ways.
Yeah. 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 That sounds like it's a great resource. And I was going to ask you, and I will ask you if you want to add anything else. But I was going to ask you, like, how do you think society could do a better job of helping people through grief or helping people understand grief? I think it's a lot of the things you're doing, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I think, talking about it, not being afraid of it, and pushing aside your discomfort.
Yeah.
We always say that the things that challenge us and make us uncomfortable are the things that make us grow. Grief is one of those things,
Hmm.
and it will only benefit us as a society if we confront it more truthfully than we have and not hide from it.
Yeah. We talked about, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here as we're wrapping up. You know, as grieving people, a lot of times we'll say, people said this to me and it really bothered me. But then on the other hand, a lot of times people are afraid to say anything because they don't want to offend us. So I guess
Right.
I would say to people like, you're going to say the wrong thing, so just say it anyway. I mean, how would you feel about that?
No, I would say not to. So that's actually what I write in my book. And again, that place of discomfort is what drives people to say something as a platitude,
Hmm.
and it misses the mark, or they stay silent because they're so uncomfortable. But if you could just put yourself in their shoes
Yeah.
and think of how you would want to be treated, as opposed to thinking about, I am here to give condolences to someone, as opposed to you pushing your feelings to someone.
Yeah.
Think about what it's like to be on the other end. And I know you can't because it is so hard to understand, but it's the compassion that we need most.
Hmm.
It's the platitudes we don't need. Platitudes are platitudes for a reason. They are hollow, but at their worst, they hurt us because they offend us. And, in our minds, we remember every kindness. I
Yeah.
remember every single thing, every email I got, every card I read. I
Hmm.
couldn't say thank you for everything, but
Hmm.
but I also remember every slight.
Hmm.
I remember when people compared their losses to mine. I remember when people told me, well, God only takes the good ones. And I was
Hmm.
like, what?
Hmm.
I remember all of those. So I would just say, it's not too late. I think that's also the real, the really important thing to remember is it's never too late. If
Hmm.
around these holiday times, someone has lost someone, a simple text even saying, I've been thinking about you and I hope you're doing well. I'm sending you a hug.
Yeah.
That could do it. That and you don't recognize how much that could mean to someone just to know they're being thought of, that they're not forgotten.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We started talking before we started recording. We're recording this the 1st of December, and I asked you how you were doing, and we talked about this time of year because of the holidays and different things that come up. But a lot of times, a lot of us are feeling a little bit drained and maybe a little bit more, lonely. It's a great time of year to reach out to someone that has gone through a loss, and as you said, just say, I'm thinking about you."
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't have to, no hearts, happy things, happy Merry Christmas, avoid
Yeah.
that, Happy New Year's. Just I'm thinking of you today. They'll know
Hmm.
what it means. They'll appreciate the sensitivity. Um, and I think that's really all that any one of us can want, right? It's to be remembered, to be acknowledged, to not be forgotten when we feel forgotten, because the holidays are tough. As I told you, I'm very low today,
Hmm.
and it's going to be part of my month.
Yeah, and that's okay. The thing is,
Yeah,
I mean, I struggle this time of year also. As I said, it's been 10 years since my daughter passed, but to me, it's I live in Ohio and it's dark. It's 5 o'clock and it's dark outside already. So there's that natural thing too. So when you're reaching out to someone that's in grief, it's not our job to make them feel better. It's just our job, as
no.
you said, to kind of acknowledge it, show some compassion and patience, and we have to be patient with ourselves as the grieving person as well. That this is something that is going to take us a while to grow through.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to give ourselves grace, and we need others to give us grace.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I did receive so many beautiful outreaches when Doug died, and I wasn't able to say thank you. I certainly wasn't at the time, and then a year had passed. I was in my year two, and then it became like, oh, can I do that? It's going to make me sad again. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I want to go there.
Hmm.
So know that, you know, doing something, saying something, means a lot. And it doesn't have to be the perfect words. It doesn't have to be the perfect, most grand gesture. It could be something as simple as, sitting in silence for a cup of coffee,
Hmm.
keeping someone company, watching a movie. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Sending a well-timed email, when you feel it
Yeah.
for no reason.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are the gestures that mean the most.
Well, Samina, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you about today?
No, I think we've covered so much of it. I just, hope that we're able to, through our mutual efforts, really help normalize grief as part of life. You can't
Hmm.
have life without grief.
Yeah.
And, to remember to kind of let's hold up a mirror to one another and think of how we would want to be treated in our darkest moments. And yeah, I just hope that those who are listening to this and to my podcast take something from it and can make someone else's experience a little gentler.
Yeah. Well, I want to commend you for the work that you're doing. It's very much needed. And I think that, you know, the more that it can become vulnerable and put ourselves out there and let people know what we're feeling and normalize, what we're going through and let people know, okay, doesn't have to be a heavy lift. It could be something small. Just do those small gestures. Trust your intuition. If you're thinking about somebody, maybe there's a reason for it. So just reach out and, say, I'm thinking about you.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not about perfection, it's about presence.
Yeah. So remind people of where they can reach you and the name of your book again.
Absolutely. So everyone can reach me at saminabari.com, and I've got two books. I can, I will, and I did, and Don't Call Me Widow. Both are available on Amazon, and then my podcast Afterlife is available on all major streaming platforms.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. You too.